The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Mike, one of these times we're going to have to bug out on the show and just say we've got tech problems, and Martha and Michelle in the background are going to have to take over and host the show. We got to plan this out. I think it'll happen.
Done deal. I love it.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Zakash, joined by my co-host, Mike Lusky. Today, we are talking about how businesses can go beyond transaction and build real community, both inside their organizations and with their customers through corporate social responsibility and philanthropy. More than ever, companies are being called to stand for something bigger than their bottom line. And the brands that rise to this challenge create stronger relationships, deeper engagement, and lasting impact in the world. And turns out sometimes it's almost the better move profitability-wise to go down this path. Usually all the stats are indicating that. Mike, can you introduce our guest today?
Yeah, absolutely, Steven. Super excited to get us started. So our guest today is Jennifer Bradbury. She's a corporate social responsibility leader with over 20 years of experience helping brands to turn purpose into impact, which we love to talk about purpose on this show. We know it's a really important aspect. Additionally, Jennifer has dedicated her career to helping businesses integrate philanthropy, social impact, and community building into their brand strategies. She spent nearly a decade at the helm at the Taco Bell Foundation, where she led efforts to scale fundraising, expand charitable initiatives, and create purpose-driven programs that engage both the employees and customers, which I think is critical, and we'll hear more about here on the show today. Today, she works with organizations to build and scale their CSR programs and drive real social change. So while also strengthening brand reputation and business growth. So Jennifer, we are so happy to have you on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's nice to have you. Maybe just to get things started, you can give us a little bit of a big picture. Why is corporate social responsibility more important now than ever for businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great place to start. It's no longer a PR and marketing strategy, right? I think for a long time that's what it was, or it was a CEO's side project, but now it's a business imperative. I think organizations that proactively embrace CSR, they're not only making a positive impact, but they're truly ensuring their own long-term success. In my experience, I think people and companies that build CSR into their actual business models often find they grow innovation, they find new growth opportunities, they truly differentiate themselves in the marketplace. And I think also the thing that's really important these days is that CSR helps build resilience against like economic, environmental, social crises, which we all know are happening regularly these days. So when you have a strong social impact narrative, you really can navigate challenges more effectively and I think maintain trust in uncertain times.
Yeah, Jennifer, I think you mentioned that CSR is sometimes seen as something separate from that core business strategy, but in reality, it can drive real business success. What's the connection between CSR and brand loyalty?
Yeah, I think there's a couple pieces. There's the consumer piece and the employee piece, right? So consumers, and especially I think younger generations today, they are increasingly preferring brands that align with their values. So companies that have a strong CSR initiative, they build trust faster, which I think just enhances their brand loyalty and, ultimately attracts the customer and maintains them even when business isn't going the way they're hoping it would. And then employees, finding employees to work these days can be a struggle, right? Finding a workforce, especially in my background of coming from QSR, there's high turnover rates, and employees want to work at purpose-driven workplaces. So organizations that really, I think, prioritize social impact, sustainability, and even like ethical practices and all, basics like that, they just tend to attract and retain top talent, while helping the bottom line, boosting overall workplace morale, boosting productivity, those kinds of things. So I think it's necessary for customers. It's necessary for employees.
I love that you mentioned that about the employees, because the employees really do care. In fact, there was a study that I came across in preparation for this show. It talked about companies that are integrating CSR into their culture, and they've seen employee engagement go up by upwards of 20%, and then seeing turnover drop off by 50%. And that was from a study that was done by Deloitte, titled actually "Purpose at Work." Like you're saying, this is happening because I would say probably consumers are expecting brands to really stand for something bigger than just the bottom line. So, Jennifer, a question for you: with many brands, want to make this impact, but it seems like they might struggle to move beyond like the one-time donations, or maybe it just seems like a surface level initiative.
Yeah.
From your experience, like what would make a CSR program like truly effective and then sustainable?
Yeah, I think there's really three pieces of that for me. One is you really have to have leadership buy-in from the top. I've done this work most recently at Taco Bell, but I've spent time at Luxottica with Oakley. I've worked with Anaheim Ducks and Honda Center, different brands. It always roots to the same stumbling blocks for people. You've got to have buy-in from the top, and it's just going to make everything easier. You're going to be able to go faster. You're going to be able to drive it into strategy whether it's the CEO, shareholders, whomever is at the helm has bought into it. You will be more successful in that way. I mean, think about it. When your CEO announces the company goals for the year, that's what everyone's focused on, right? And so if your CSR initiatives are part of that goal setting journey, then everyone in the company is going to care about it, right? So I think that's one of the number one things I tell people. I think the second thing is really like, you got to walk the walk, put your money where your mouth is, do what you say you're going to do. There's a lot of times I think companies make these lofty commitments that by 2035, we're going to do this. Whoever goes back and checks that by 2035, you did what you said you were going to do 10 years ago, right? It doesn't happen often. And so, yeah, it's great to do that. But I think when we talk about trust and transparency, people want to know what you're doing now, and they want to see that. So I really think it's important to just tell customers what you're going to do and then go do it in the simplest terms. And then the third thing is you've got to use data. I mean, data drives our world these days, and there's no reason it can't drive your CSR efforts too. So data being either what's the insight that you're using to choose the CSR work you're going to choose, ground yourself in that insight and use it. And then on the other side, how are you measuring the work you're doing, and what measurement are you using to make sure that it's meaningful and that you can articulate it?
What was that data point you were sharing before the show, Jennifer, on that?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways to measure data, right? I was talking to a company the other day, and they were saying that for every dollar they invest in charity work, they actually make $22 in profit. I mean, that's an insane statistic when you think about it, right? It can be your business model. It doesn't have to be the nice to have side project.
Right.
Yeah, especially, and you mentioned this, especially when you kind of understand the storytelling aspects around that. I mean, that's such a big thing for, the community building and the building the brand trust. And like you said, walking the walk. How can companies use storytelling to showcase their social impact in a way that kind of authentically resonates with their audience?
It's funny you asked this, Stephen, because I'm actually teaching a workshop for Points of Light about this exact topic in early April. So for those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're a fantastic civic engagement organization. And if your company is a part of them, you can join myself and some others on a storytelling workshop there. But we know that people's attention spans are mere seconds, nanoseconds now. So, and so you don't have a lot of time to tell your story. No one's going on these long format journeys anymore as they're scrolling through their phones, right? So how do you reach them? And I think what I found is most successful is when you can really have social groups that you trust. That's who you're paying attention to, right? I'm paying attention to my friends on Instagram. I'm paying attention to the people I follow on TikTok. So who are those people who are in my network that I can capture their trust? And an example of something that worked really well for us at Taco Bell was we have a scholarship program where there's 2,500 young people in it, right? And so who better to tell the story than those 2,500 people? They believe in the program they're in, they trust the program they're in, and they are excited to tell their friends about it. So if you can give them the tools and resources to go do that they become your ambassadors really quickly. And I think your employees are the other group that does that really well.
Yeah, I think
Interesting.
Where you really get that connection is when you're able to talk with people who really want to live that story, right? I mean, who are, this is what
authenticity.
Yep.
Yeah, it creates probably the strongest type of connection. So Jennifer, we talk a lot about purpose on this show, and even with our agency, right? Everything that we do really starts with that why, why a company exists. So question for you around purpose, like what would you say is the importance of a company's purpose? Just in general, and then maybe in the work that you do, what's the importance of purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really big on finding people's why. What's your why? Personally, as a corporation, what's someone's why? And so I think when you're really clear on your why, then things start to fall pretty easily, right? And you can stay true to that. And so when companies find their purpose, everything starts to make more sense. And I think when your CSR can ladder up to your purpose as a company, you start to get this perfect, equation happening where you can affect profit, you can affect people, you can affect purpose. And so really the triple bottom line becomes such a easy place to get to suddenly.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with you. It feels more authentic probably, right? And it's coming from a more genuine place if it aligns there. So yeah.
Well, it's too, Mike, it's also got more staying power because company can jump on some trend of some,
right.
Cause or something, and they'll do some ad or some marketing campaign around it. But then you look back like 10 years ago and they're totally off that trend. And it really wasn't what they were about to begin with. Right. So if they stay aligned to their purpose, then whatever they did 10, 15 years ago, they'll be like, yeah, they've always been about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, actually, like during the Super Bowl, like my, other corporate philanthropy friends, we like to play the game when you're watching the ads of like, there's so many purpose-driven ads now, right? Which is fantastic and great to see. But you're watching the ad and you're going, what brand is that going to be? What company is that going to be? And you get to the end and you're like, huh, really that they did that? That's not a win. That's not a memory for people. But when you get to the end and you're like, of course they did that. Yes, that was them. Yeah. That's success, and that's the authenticity and transparency that customers want to see.
I would totally agree with you. Yeah, that Mountain Dew commercial with Seal in it. Not quite sure what the purpose of that was. So I don't know if we've got anybody listening from Mountain Dew or the marketing team. We'd love to talk to you a little bit more about the thoughts behind that. But yeah, bringing it back to this idea of storytelling, I just wanted to make this one little point, right? Because we know that storytelling and purpose are super important in our marketing. I kind of found that it seems like it's a real game changer, even for CSR. There was a study in 22 that was done by Stanford from their cognitive science department about this topic of storytelling. And they found that that the brands that communicate their social impact through real stories rather than just statistics, people are almost, like you said about that $22 to one. This is like a funny coincidence. It's 22x more likely to remember that message when it's communicated through a story. So I think one, alignment with the purpose, and then making sure that it's told through a story, definitely seems like it resonates with audiences.
And I would even take that one step further to say there has to be consistency to it. You can't just like jump topics in this space. People see through that, right? You're just you're throwing things out and you're jumping topics of what you care for. But I think taking a stance in something that you're going all in on and you're going deep, that resonates with people, and it just gives you a lot more longevity in terms of the work you're doing too, and the impact you're making.
Totally. Yeah. I love Stephen's comment about, alignment with the purpose, because it'll become your true north in those cases. Question maybe for you, Jennifer, we know that it can't just be a good story when it comes to these CSR programs. There has to be some depth to it. How do businesses ensure that their CSR programs, their efforts are reaching the right audience? Like, what do they have to do?
I mean, I don't know. There's a magic answer to that. Isn't that the marketing question in general?
That's our job, Mike.
Exactly.
Reaching your right audience. Yeah. But I think, there's so many different ways to measure success in this space, right? So is it financial contributions? Is it social media engagement levels? Is it customer sentiment? Like you can be all over the map there, and you can get super granular. Is it number of individuals served? Is it how much we reduced our carbon footprint? How many scholarships we awarded? You can go on and on and on. But I think if you do it correctly and accurately, they can be meaningful, but going back to being transparent on what you're measuring, I think that's where people care, and that's where you can report on your business goals, and you can say, here are societal goals that align with our business goals, and we're being transparent about it. And that's where I see success when people are honest in what they're doing.
Do you have like some examples of like, the metrics that matter, or even some of the creative ones?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I don't know that there's like one metric. It's like, what's core to your business, right? Because if you're talking to a QSR brand versus a shoe company, what's important to you is different. And so pick something that's authentic and then go for it.
Yeah, I know we try to encourage people to be very creative around the metrics, because we so often just get stuck with, I'm optimizing, the transaction, the transactional numbers. And it's like, okay, there's a lot of other leading indicators and creative numbers that you can have come into play to that bottom line, right?
Well, and how do your metrics boost your storytelling, right? Like if you don't, you can measure anything these days, but how can you use it to help tell your story better? That's the perfect model, right? That's what you're going for.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's important to not just maybe, jump in and go with, a standard set, but actually the metrics can maybe help you tell that story, further, right? If I was World Life Foundation or something, is there a number of whales that were, particularly saved, right? So it just sort of accentuates or adds to the ability to tell that story. So Jennifer, for the companies that have great CSR programs, but they're sort of struggling with visibility of those programs, what strategies can help them, get that message out?
Yeah, again, I think just as another piece of the storytelling conversation, but I think something that's really helpful is to get outside third-party validation of your work. How can you get either industry recognition? How can you be involved in conferences or awards or public forums? So if you're doing truly great work, I think people want to talk about it and they want to share it, right? So research who are those partners that could do your storytelling for you. Is it a university? Is it a conference? Is it what third party can validate the work you're doing? And I think that really can kind of help people that are doing really good work move it forward even more.
Yeah, that totally makes a ton of sense. If you can find, I guess, other partnerships that align with your purpose. It was funny. There was this report that was done by Harvard Business Review. And for those that collaborated with organizations, either a nonprofit per se or another social enterprise, for those that actually did find a partner, they found a 40% higher success rate in achieving their long-term impact, right? So that sense of community and identifying some of those other organizations that might be aligned with you both, culturally and along with your purpose.
Yeah. And I think another piece of that is you don't have your core business is your core business, right? Like I used to say at Taco Bell, we're really good at making tacos. Like that's our business, right? But our charity work is tied to youth education and workforce readiness. There are a lot of people who are really good at that. A lot of nonprofits, a lot of people that are doing that work in that space. And I felt like it was our job to be a convener of those groups and allow them the opportunities to either elevate their work, collaborate, take that work further. That was the platform we were able to provide for them. So you don't have to be able to solve all the problems. It's how do you convene the right people to do the work?
Yeah.
To the best of their abilities.
Yeah. And I'd say in general, that goes, in line with people being human in the sense that you'll reward those that are doing good. Right. And if people are doing good to you, maybe, Taco Bell has a very specific demographic and, target audience, getting involved with that community or helping that particular constituency out. It's almost circular. It becomes circular in effect, right? Like they will. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Mike, that's kind of why like we focus on really trying to make that emotional connection with our audiences when we're marketing, because that, like the stats say, is like 306% increase in lifetime customer value over just a satisfied customer. So if you can move them from, hey, I'm just satisfied to like, I love this brand, I love what they're about, that's where you get that real long-lasting connection.
It also gives brands permission then to, when something goes wrong, customers aren't leaving them, right? Because everyone are going to go wrong. And so, but if people already trust you, you give permission to make mistakes, you give permission to fix it. And if you just think a brand's okay, you're not allowing them that leniency. But if you really love a brand, it's okay to stumble. You can stumble. I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. We don't think about that so much, but it's like you've built that trust up with someone. You know this brand is about it, and they're trying to be good, and they're trying to do right, and so you give them a little more room to be human and make mistakes and things like that. Whereas if you're not doing that, and people are already kind of skeptical of you, and now you stepped on, some kind of landmine, or, were exposed for something, you're in a big hole, and it's going to be hard for you to climb your way out of that just because of the work you've not been doing, I guess, for the previous many, many years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For sure. Steve, before we maybe move on to another question or another topic, Jennifer, I'm sure you've come across in your experience organizations that, yes, we tried this and then maybe it failed, or maybe they're, just sort of on the cusp of really trying to pull the trigger on something like this. What would you say for those that, we tried it and failed? But they genuinely would like to have a thriving program. What would you say to them? Like, what steps can they take?
I think there's two things. I'd say keep going. Don't let one misstep derail you. I think you fail fast and then you move on. And if you're not failing, are you really trying big enough things anyways? I'm a firm believer that if you're trying big things, you are going to fail. So fail quickly and move on, right? And then I think it goes back to what we were kind of talking about at the beginning of the show in terms of really understanding your why and then developing an authentic strategy around that. So There's so many issues, right? There's so many things that need fixing in this world, but you can't do it all by being everything to everyone or nothing to no one. It's one of my favorite sayings. So figure out what you can do and little engine that could it, right? Like you're going to make an impact. You're going to make a difference. And if you stay true to yourself and your why, you'll get there.
Yeah. I always think about that with our Bliss philosophy, building love into scalable systems. It's, little by little, a little makes a lot. So you just keep doing it. Just keep trying it. We've got a question here from our audience from a LinkedIn user. With more businesses operating remotely or digitally, how can companies maintain a sense of community and social impact without a physical presence in local communities? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think that companies have to foster a culture of trust and inclusion, and then also open communication, right? So if your company is actively listening to employees and creating space for dialogue and ensuring everyone feels heard, you're going to have a more dynamic environment. People want to share their opinions. They want to voice what matters to them. And I think that becomes even more apparent in the remote and digital world, and turning that in, but maintaining that local presence of it, right? So what matters to people when you're sitting in front of a computer screen all day? You still care about what's happening in your community, right? Like, I'm going to close this computer screen and I'm going to go out into my neighborhood. And so making sure that, you can take that work back to your community, I think is really important. And I think as we choose companies to work for, that needs to be grounded in your choice of the company that you work for, right? And if what you go to do and where you work and who you give your dollar to, you want to make sure they're doing that for you.
Yeah, I think let's get into that just a little bit. I think there's a lot of the younger generations, I think, come into the workforce now because I think all the work the previous generations have done, their consciousness and the gravity of their consciousness has risen really quite quickly to where they come into the workforce, and now they are seeking that, that meaning and that an alignment with values. Is that when you're doing your work, is that something you're very, paying close attention to?
I mean, it's top of mind. I think there's two insights that are really relevant to me about this younger generation. It's one, they want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And two, they want to give back to their communities. I mean, those are two of the top things that matter to them. So when you're doing this work, it's really interesting to think, how can you as a brand or a company do those things for them, whether they're your employees or your customers? Again, back to, it matters from both directions. And if you're doing it authentically, your employees become ambassadors. If you're doing it authentically, your customers give you their business. It just becomes this like circle of winning.
I know. This is why everything we start with our marketing is like, we're starting with your purpose and your higher purpose and making sure you understand, because most of the time, a lot of small businesses don't understand a higher purpose to what they're doing. And so,
because you created a small business oftentimes because you're solving a problem, right? You have a great product or you have a solution, and that's where your head's at. And as you grow, all these other things start to happen, and you're like, oh, this is becoming bigger than just that one piece now. And maybe that's not where you weren't aware that you needed to think about these things. And that's great that you guys can help with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you see, then it becomes, sometimes where companies go wrong, or we'll see it becomes more about the profit, and then, you lose the purpose, or it becomes secondary. Then it leads to bad decisions, in why they got started in the first place. So, yeah. But to your point, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no, go ahead and finish your thought there.
No, I was just going to say, to Jennifer's point, I think it becomes a strategic advantage at that. We're in a tight labor market. If someone's going to make a decision to go work for one organization versus another, it could be that specific reason, right? Like, why, if I'm a developer, Why am I building the system that I'm building? If I'm selling a particular product or developing a particular product, say in a lab, why exactly am I doing this? Right? Everyone sort of aligns then with that purpose, and it'll become a strategic advantage in terms of even in the workforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we talk about, why do we exist is one of the questions we kind of like want to delve into a little bit. Jennifer, as companies look to the future, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for businesses to create lasting social impact?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a really big question. And I think there's some systemic change that is going to have to occur, not only for our workforce to be ready for what is coming, but I really think it goes back to there's got to be a big disruption in our education system and workforce readiness system. I don't think our systems that were created during the Industrial Revolution are preparing our workforce for what is coming. And so, I have teenagers myself, and it's fascinating to just talk to them about what they're learning and what they're doing at school, and then think about what I expect my employees or my coworkers to do every day. And there's just seems to be still a massive disconnect in the system as a whole. Not that you can't find fantastic teachers and great schools and people that are trying to bridge that gap, but as a society, I think our education system is just really ready for disruption. We've disrupted a lot of technology, right? But this other education workforce readiness piece hasn't caught up. And so I just think that businesses are going to have to take the lead in this to really have the workforce that they want to have in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense, and I think hopefully they're starting to think about it a lot more and more readily. So, Jennifer, when it comes earlier, you mentioned you had to get buy-in from the top, right? And so, for the leaders who want to build a strong community inside of their organization, what's that first step for them?
Yeah, I think it's listening. I think to be a good listener, to be a good leader, you have to be a really good listener. And I think, having open communication doesn't mean you have to do everything that everyone tells you, right? Listening isn't just because you listen to something doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but allowing people to feel like they've been heard, I think is really important and a really important step to building trust and inclusion. So yeah, I think that's important. I think there's a lot of other resources that I think a lot of big companies do it really well, but whether it's a mentorship program or your employee resource groups, your ERGs, or your leading volunteer initiatives, I think that those types of efforts by companies also can really help create a sense of belonging and shared purpose for people too.
Yeah. What a great point though, right? I think we've said it before on the show. There's a reason we have 2 ears and maybe one mouth. Be able to listen better, right? And I think be mindful, like we talked about on the last show. There's so much noise out there that when it comes to this, maybe shutting out the noise and then really just trying to sit and listen.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for if, say, I'm running a small business and my head's down and I'm working hard, but I know this is important and I want to do something? What advice do you have for them to kind of carve out some energy and effort here?
I think it's have your employees do it. Give them permission to come up with ideas of what they want to be involved in, right? Like again, it goes back to the listening piece. What if you ask people let's do good in our community. What would be important to everyone? Again, you don't have to take every single suggestion, but it doesn't have to be your headspace to figure it out. You have lots of great, smart people that work for you, I would imagine, right? So allow them permission to operate in this space. I truly think companies that do this well allow people across the organization to participate and own it, right? That was something I thought I really believed when I was with Taco Bell was that, and with the foundation was if I want every single person at Taco Bell to feel responsible for the work that the Taco Bell Foundation is doing. Whether you're in operations, whether you're in HR, whether you're in marketing, you have a responsibility and a piece of the foundation's success as your job. And that's when the magic happens, when everyone feels responsible for it.
I know. I think it's so important too, because I think a lot of times, like a small business owner, you might think everything falls on you. And if you're the one torchbearer of that, the light's not going to shine as bright. But if you get everybody involved carrying the torch in there, then it's much brighter.
Because Stephen, if I'm the leader and I say, oh, we're going to go work at this food pantry today. Okay, everyone's like, okay, we're going to go do this. This is our work day, right? Like, okay, maybe I feel a little bit better. But if as an organization, we come up with something collectively that we want to go do, that becomes a very different level of engagement for people than, oh, this is what our boss told us we were going to do today.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to get that sort of buy-in as a group, right? With that, we talked about at the beginning, that community within your organization.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, before we wrap up, we ask every single guest the same question is, do you think love belongs in business?
Absolutely. I absolutely think love belongs in business, and not really as even a soft ideal. I think it's a powerful force for leadership and impact. Love, I think to me, it means leading with empathy. It means valuing people over profit. And it means making decisions that you're really going to impact and uplift your employees, your customers, your communities. So, and again, it goes back to what we were just talking about. It's creating workplaces where people feel seen and heard and empowered, right, to contribute to something greater than themselves. So absolutely, I think it builds deeper connections and creates lasting and meaningful change.
Ooh, I love that. The deeper connections, lasting change. Jennifer, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been incredibly insightful. Thank you for sharing your experience and your insights into this topic. Where can our listeners learn more about you or find more about your work?
Just come find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear all about what everyone is up to and the work you guys are doing in your companies and communities. So shoot me a note on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Jennifer. And to our listeners, thank you for being a part of the conversation today. If today's discussion inspired you, make sure you subscribe and share this episode. And until next time, keep leading with purpose and impact.